We're seeing the highest rate of buyer cancellations in over a decade, and if I'm being honest, it's starting to send some panic through the housing market. In some markets, homes are sitting on the market longer than they have in years, while in others, they're still getting multiple offers and above the asking price. So what's really going on? Today I'm breaking down exactly what I'm seeing as someone who works with both buyers and sellers, and what that means for you if you're looking to buy or sell in, say, the next 6 to 12 months. But before we do that, I'd like to take a minute and ask you a question. What are you seeing in your current market right now? Do me a favor, let me know in the comments, but be sure to tag your city. And while you're there, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, especially if you're trying to make smart moves in the current housing market. Now, if you've been watching my channel for any period of time, you know I've been a really big housing bull. Going back prior to the pandemic, I've been talking about how you should be owning property, how house prices are going to continue to rise, and it's all based off the low supply and higher demand that we've had. But here's the thing, ever since rates have gone up, inventory started to grow, buyer demand has started to back off, and the housing market has started to shift. And because of that, my opinions on the housing market have also started to shift, which we're going to cover in today's video. But with that said, I want to be very clear. The housing market isn't crashing, but it is definitely shifting in favor of buyers. At the moment, buyer cancellations are at a record high, 15% nationally, which is the highest level we've seen since at least 2017. On top of that, we have homes sitting on the market for weeks, sometimes months, primarily due to housing affordability. And because of this, we've got fewer showings out there, we got days on the market adding up, and we have a lot of sellers out there having to reduce their price in order to stay competitive in today's market. Now, at the same time, while all of that's going on, you still have some homes getting multiple offers, selling above the asking price. In fact, I just listed a home here locally this past weekend where we received 3 offers, with one of them coming in at the asking price of $1.2 million, another coming in just above the asking price at $1.22 million, and then the third coming in at $1.29 million. That's 7.5% above the asking price. So remember, before you jump on the national headline train and think that everything is the same, remember that real estate is local. And right now we have the biggest bifurcation in markets than we've seen in a very long time, which is essentially telling you not all real estate markets are equal and not all homes are equal. The truth is, this shift is actually taking us back to a more traditional housing market, not a housing collapse. The first thing I want to talk about in today's video is the buyer side of the transaction. At the moment, I'm not only seeing more leverage in the transaction for buyers, but I'm also seeing more buyers walk away from the table when the negotiations don't go their way. I mean, if I'm being honest, for the first time since the pandemic, I'm actually seeing real negotiations happen out there, where buyers aren't only getting their buyer's agent compensation covered, they're getting repairs covered, they're getting interest rate buy downs covered, but in some cases, they're actually getting negotiations like price reductions covered after they're already under contract. At the same time, we have more buyers canceling right now, more so than I've seen going back at least 10 years. The primary reasons for that is because the buyer now has more options to choose from. Inventory's gone up, and at the same time, buyers are just being more cautious. They don't feel that rush to jump in. But with that said, some of the things that I'm seeing buyers walk away from are flaws in the inspection. Things that are normal fixes, cosmetic fixes, things that aren't a big deal, are starting to be more of a concern for buyers out there because they're thinking, hey, well, this property isn't perfect. I'm paying, maybe top dollar for it in my market. There's some houses that are just coming up down the street. Why don't I just go try my luck there? Hopefully the inspection comes in better on those. In addition to that, a lot of buyers out there are having second thoughts on the price, on the negotiation after they're already under contract. I tell buyers all the time, it's completely normal to have cold feet once your offer gets accepted because it's a large purchase, because in many cases you're putting a large amount of money down. There's a little bit of fear that's completely normal in that process. But at the same time, buyers are continuing to shop well after they go under contract on a home. I typically put buyers on an automated email drop of properties they're looking for in my market, and I can see when they go in there and access that email. And I never take those people off unless those clients want to be removed from those emails. And one thing I'm seeing right now is that clients that are already under contract on homes are continuing to scroll that, flag things that they like, even after they close on that property, which tells me that buyers are continuously watching for better options to pop up. And you can imagine what happens if you're already under contract and you're having issues in the negotiation process and something pops up down the street that looks similar, maybe it's priced a little bit better. Well, the very first thing you probably want to do is just cut ties with that deal and run, which is one of the reasons that we're actually seeing cancellations rise. In fact, I just had a negotiation go south on the very last day that contingencies were supposed to be removed because the buyer found out that someone had passed away in the property just a couple of years ago from natural causes. Now, I know culturally that can be an issue for some people out there, but most of the time it doesn't present an issue. Well, in this case, the agent got back to me and said, hey, it's not only the fact that someone had passed away in the property, we also saw that the seller had a lis pendens on title, in addition to the property not being perfect inside like we had liked it. So we're putting all these things together and just considering that we're going to walk away from the deal. Now understand, when there's a lis pendens or something like that on title, that's something that's going to be cleared up prior to closing. Also, the repair stuff, that could have been addressed as well. Now, the one thing we couldn't have changed is the fact that someone had passed away. But either way, they coupled all of these things together and just decided to walk away from the transaction with the hopes that they were going to find something better. But here's my question to you. If someone had passed away in a property from natural causes, would that cause you to walk away from a deal? Do me a favor and let me know in the comments. Now, as I mentioned earlier, not all areas are created equal. At the moment, the Sun Belt metros are the areas that are getting hit the hardest, with about 1 in 5 deals falling out of contract in the Jacksonville area. At the same time, you have areas like Vegas, Atlanta, Orlando, and Phoenix all coming in right at 20%. So it's not just that buyers are a little bit more picky, it's the fact that now they have more leverage and they're not afraid to use it when things don't go their way. In fact, I had a deal here that I was selling in Huntington Beach where we originally came on the market at $1.399 million. And we started that transaction with multiple offers, accepting our first deal at $1.39 million. Now that buyer ended up walking away from the transaction because they did a home inspection and there were some things in the inspection that actually spooked them. And because of that, they were thinking that they wanted some sort of big reduction in the price in order to move forward. Well, at that time, my seller wasn't willing to consider that because we had multiple offers on the transaction and we had only been under contract a couple of days. Well, here's the thing. That deal fell apart. We went back to the market where we started getting more buyer activity again. But here's the thing. We now have an inspection on that property from an absolutely awful inspector who spent way too much time in the property, assuming things that ended up not being true, which we now had to disclose to other potential buyers coming in that transaction. Well, guess what? That scared a lot of buyers away because in all reality, they didn't have the context of actually being there to hear what was going on. They were making assumptions based on the inspection report that they were reading. And because of that, we had to reduce the price 2 different times and go under contract 3 times in total in order to get this property sold. And here's the thing. None of this was fault of my seller. My seller did everything they were supposed to do in this transaction. And at the same time, as their agent, I'm telling you, I did everything I was supposed to do in this transaction as well. It just came down to buyers having more options out there, being a little bit more picky. And when negotiations weren't going their way, they just decided to pick up and move on to a different property versus negotiating again, because we had received offers that were really close to our original offer, all cash deals that we just tried to negotiate just a little bit to get them up in price. And those buyers said, you know what? We're not negotiating at all. We're walking away from the transaction, which at the end of the day end up biting us in the butt, which if I'm being honest has happened on almost every single transaction I've done in the last 4 to 5 months. Every single deal has had some sort of problem, whether it's the inspection blowout we missed to, financing changes, people changing lenders at the last minute. Maybe they no longer qualified for the conventional loan, had to go hard money for some reason. On top of having a deal where the buyer ended up losing their job mid-transaction, having to back out of that deal, us having to go back to the market to fall out of escrow again to another buyer who had a job change. Which, if I'm being honest, these things do happen, but rarely do they happen on every single deal. And because of that, a lot of sellers are out there are getting spooked. Not only are they expecting their home to sell in days, weeks, even worst case, maybe a couple of months, they're not expecting their home to sit on the market for 3, 4, 5 months with little to no offers. And because of that, I'm seeing a lot of sellers out there start to panic. And not only are the sellers panicking, the real estate agents on the other side are panicking. And you're like, Jeb, how do you know this? Because of my presence here online, I have a lot of real estate agents reaching out to me, wanting to talk about their transactions, things they can do in order to maybe get their property sold. And we're talking about things, and I'm asking them questions. Hey, did you do professional photography? Did you do 3D tours? Did you do video walkthrough? How'd you price the home? And they're sending me this stuff, and we're looking it up. And I'm telling them, well, in all reality, it doesn't look like you did anything wrong. But unfortunately, those agents don't know how to convey that to the buyer, because a lot of agents in today's market haven't sold real estate in a traditional real estate market where things don't sell immediately, where you have to have that tough conversation with a seller in order to reduce the price and get things moved along. Those agents are just used to things flying off the shelf. As soon as they put it on the market, it sells, and they think they did a great job, when in all reality, it was just the market pushing that thing along. The agents that are selling in today's market and having success are the real agents out there, the people that are dealing with the tough conversations, the tough negotiations, and the ones that are communicating every single week to their clients, even when they're not giving them the information they want to hear. And that's leading a lot of sellers to also reach out to me, talking about moving their property to relist with me instead of keeping it with their current agent. They're talking about, hey, Jeb, I don't think my agent's doing their job. And while I'm in the business of selling real estate, one of the questions I asked them is, do you think it's your agent or do you think it's the market? And I'll tell you, most of the time, they say it's their agent. And we talk about the things that the agent are doing. And most of the time, the agent's doing the right things. Again, they're just not able to convey that to the client. So in my opinion, as homes tend to sit on the market longer, especially if interest rates stay high, you're going to have more and more of these seller panicking situations out there. And because there's been so much equity increase over the last couple of years, especially if somebody's owned that home for say 3, 4, 5 years ago, they built up a lot of equity in that property. And because of that, some of the sellers out there are willing to walk away from some of that equity in order to just get the property sold, in order to move on. In fact, I have some clients now that were just over it. They said, hey, listen, you know what? We're willing to accept this. We're willing to move on. We don't really want the tough negotiation because we're just ready to move on. We've done well on this property. We're not fighting for any more. We're just ready to get to the next one, get out of this property so that we can end up buying the property where we want to be. So if you're a buyer out there, these are the transactions that you're looking for. The ones that have been sitting on the market a little bit longer, the ones where the seller has some motivation, these are the real opportunities out there. And trust me, as time goes on, there's going to be more and more of these. But here's what I'll tell you from the selling side. If your home is on the market and you're not getting any showings at all, then chances are your home is overpriced. Now, at the same time, if your home is on the market, you're getting showings, you're not getting offers, then chances are there's probably something wrong with the property. Maybe cosmetically it doesn't show well. There's something going on there. So maybe not really the price, but lowering the price would probably help you. Now, the third option is that you're not only getting showings, you're getting offers as well, but they're just not coming in at the price that you think they should be at. Well, in my opinion, in that case, then you're definitely priced wrong. If all of the offers are supporting a lower price, then that's the market telling you that's what the home is worth. Because in my experience, your first offer or two are typically your best offers. The longer you sit on the market, the more buyers think that your home is either overpriced or there's something wrong with it. Now, neither of those have to be true, but perception is reality. Now, earlier I said that housing prices aren't crashing. They're just starting to shift a little bit. Understand that national prices are still up about 2% year over year, despite inventory increasing, despite lower buyer demand. In fact, buyer demand is actually higher this year than it was last year, which is not what the headlines are reporting. But the primary reason for that is because interest rates this year for the first half of the year were actually lower than they were the first half of last year. Now, we're about to move into that time in the year where we saw that drop in interest rates last September to around 6% on a 30-year fixed. Now, I don't know that we're going to be at 6% this year on a 30-year fixed. So what you're going to see is buyer demand's actually going to drop below where last year numbers were. That's going to make the headline. It's going to say not only are house prices coming down, it's also going to say that buyer demand is also down. But the one thing to remember is it's a very, very low bar regardless of which way you look at it. If prices are increasing annually, we set a very low bar last year. If prices are decreasing annually, it's from a very, very low bar. But at the same time, about 1 in 3 markets are seeing some sort of decline out there. Now, most of them are mild, but there are parts in Florida and Texas that are seeing 8 to 10% lower than they were back in the highs of 2022. Now, part of the reason for that is because home prices went up so much in those areas. So some sort of regression, some sort of pullback is completely normal. Now, some of these areas have things like insurance issues. They're prone to natural disasters. There's not as many people migrating to those areas because of housing affordability and the changes out there, which in turn is impacting buyer demand. At the same time, inventory is growing. More people are putting their homes on the market, and the homes that are coming on the market aren't really selling because of the issues that we mentioned a moment ago. So that inventory is growing, buyer demand is backing off. So in order for things to get sold, sellers are having to reduce their prices, which is why you're seeing declines in those markets. But as I mentioned earlier, most people forget what a normal housing market looks like. The last 3 to 4 years of the housing market isn't a normal market. And for many of you, that's all you know. A normal housing market is one where homes don't really sell in the first weekend. They take sometimes weeks, sometimes months in order to get offers and go under contracts. A normal market is where price reductions actually happen, where buyers don't just come in as soon as you list the home. And at the same time, negotiations are completely normal, where bidding wars aren't really the normal thing. So we're getting back to a more traditional housing market where both buyers and sellers have some leverage depending on what they're selling. Now, I'm one of those firm believers that lower rates is going to bring some buyer demand back. But at the same time, I also believe it's going to bring some more inventory to the market because there are some people out there sitting on properties that are looking to move. And with a little lower interest rate, they're likely to list their homes. Now, most of those sellers are going to buy something else. So they're going to put one on the market. They're going to take one off the market. But I don't believe that slightly lower interest rates or interest rates into the high 5% range is really going to move prices very much. I think that home prices are probably going to stay right at the rate of inflation. In fact, in some areas, you could see home prices down in real terms by 1-2%. And because of that, I don't feel like there's a rush to go out there and buy a home. Yes, some housing markets are different. Inventory is still low. Buyer demand is still strong. Things are moving very, very quickly. Even in those markets, I think things are going to continue to settle down. In markets like I'm in Southern California, I feel like it's more fair out there than anything else. Yes, buyers have some leverage in some negotiations. Sellers have some leverage in some negotiations. I've had some homes sell immediately with multiple offers over the asking, and I've had some homes sit on the market having to do several price reductions in order to get that home sold. So it all depends on what you're selling. But either way, if you're a buyer out there, use your leverage, but be smart. You know, one thing I want to see as a listing agent representing sellers is when a buyer submits their offer, not only do I want to see a strong, clean offer, but I want to see a strong intent to close on top of, pre-approval, proof of funds, just to show that that buyer's serious. Now, if you're somebody out there considering buying a home, shopping, haven't been through the pre-approval process, want to know how to make strong offers, even if it's below the asking price so that a seller takes you serious, well, that's where I actually want to plug our team. We've helped hundreds and hundreds of people here on YouTube, and we'd love the opportunity to help you too. You can actually get in touch with us directly using that link in the description. Now, that link will get you in touch with us regardless of whether you're trying to get a mortgage or connect with a vetted real estate agent anywhere in the country. So if we can be of assistance, make sure you click below. Now, the one thing I want you to remember from today's video is that the market's not broken. It's just adjusting. And if you're buying, it's time to be strategic, whereas if you're selling, it's time to be a little bit more flexible. And please, please, please don't get caught up in listening to the headlines or especially fear-based advice. Instead, work with somebody who actually understands what's happening in the market right now. But my question to you is, are buyers or sellers in control of your market right now? Do me a favor and drop your city and what you're seeing in the comments. I'd love to compare notes. Also, if this video gave you any real insight into what's happening out there, hit the like button and subscribe. It helps the channel and also keeps you informed.